Okay, got it. I know your name. I just didn't know it matched with your face. Thank
We
you.
met at the last meeting when you were on holiday.
Oh, excuse me. At the infested water park with my children. No, we went to Great Wolf Lodge.
Oh, my goodness.
Giant germ.
And I have been asked to introduce what quorum or to announce what quorum is. I believe quorum is still 17 as it was at our last meeting.
We are well above quorum.
So we are well above quorum. So let me call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. And thank you to you on Zoom who are here also. Sherry, oh yeah, you're joining on Zoom and you're here in person.
Thank you, some people.
Amazing, amazing. I have said in the chat, but I'll say again, for those of you on Zoom, the chat is visible on our screen, so don't send me any secret messages there because everyone can see what's there. And I would invite you all to help me in the process of making sure if there are hands raised, I'm going to work on really responding and engaging with the people on Zoom. But if there's something I missed, either a question there, that's partly why I'm putting the chat up there. If there's something I missed, make sure, and I know that I'll have Douglas and Anthony from the executive committee to help with that, but the more help, the better. So our first item of business is approval of the agenda. And I need a motion for that. Okay, got it. I need a motion for approving the agenda. Remind me of your name again. Siraj moves a second. Erica, the second. All in favor? All right. Thank you. Next is to approve the minutes from the way back in January meeting, the January 11th meeting. Are there any changes or corrections to the minutes of any changes or corrections to the minutes?
There was one I just pointed out to Jill that it still says agenda, it doesn't say minutes. So
Oh,
the heading needs to be corrected. Other than that, we're good.
say minutes.
It has already been corrected. It was focused elsewhere.
Thank you.
Content's good.
And any corrections? Hearing none, the minutes are approved, and let me just acknowledge Jill's superhuman feat being absent at that meeting due to unavoidable reasons. She still managed to go through people's notes, the recording.
Thank you all who assisted. So thank
Yes,
you.
and there was some assistance from numerous folks. So bravo. I read the minutes. It made me tired just to remember that meeting. But you did a great job. And I am, yeah. Next item. We have two additional student senators to recall who have not been able to participate. There was one other student who was going to be here today, Ollie. But the students are Charjapad Sayara and Gian Castro Manco. And so I need, we have sent, and they've missed at least 2 or 3 Senate meetings in a row, in some cases more. Which is warrant for then an email from Senate, a letter, which Jill sent out. One has replied to say, I can't serve after all, and one didn't really reply, but has removed it. A third person replied and said, I am still interested, and we invited Ali to continue, and I hope to see him here today, and maybe at some point I will. But so these 2 student senators need to be recalled. So they are off the roster. Do I have a motion? Anthony?
Move to recall those 2 names. For non-attendance from the Senate roster.
And a second?
I second.
Thank you. Who? Oh, that was Dan. Thank you,
It's
Dan.
Dan.
Thanks, Daniel. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All right, that passes, and we regret that it's been challenging for students to participate, and we thank Yana for being the only student present.
Ariana.
No, Ariana.
Oh,
Ariana's here.
you're there.
I'm here.
Thank you, everyone. I have not studied the Zoom screen sufficiently. Glad you're here. All right. My chair's report is what is next on the agenda. We're gonna, yeah. And let me point out again, like our meeting in January, we have a Senate parliamentarians Robert's Rules refresher for after committee reports before new business, focused on new business. We ran out of time for that in January. Leslie had prepared it. She's ready today. She's not feeling well, so there's a chance that we may need to forego it just because she's not feeling well. But we're going to try to include that today. It means that there's an item that comes. We're used to just having the last committee report and leaving, but there's an item that comes there to help instruct us in how Senate meetings, in your power as senators in meetings like this regarding new business. So let me. So I have several matters that I want to tell you about in the chair's report. One, I want to clarify a role I played in the concerns about the B building. You may have seen an email last night from Laura Beatty, the union PSC chapter chair, that shared Shahir VP Irfan's response to the complaints came through the PSC about conditions in the B building. I want to give you some context for how that arrived. Just for clarity, at our cabinet meeting yesterday, where Rochelle Isaacs, the president of faculty council, and I are members of the cabinet, Rochelle asked the question about a response, having heard no response from the administration to the concerns raised. She was hearing from faculty that there'd been no response. At the meeting, VP Irfan said that he had sent a response last week and then shared it with us. I followed up with chapter chair Beatty by saying, when do you plan to send to share that response with the membership? And she replied, good idea, I hadn't thought of it, sent it out last night. That was, it's a tricky, I want to be really careful about my role as Senate chair in relationship to the union, that I'm not interfering, but I wanted you to know how that transpired. I never know if I'm doing the right thing, but that was my choice in how to say, is this response going to be shared? And it was. So if you didn't see that, take a look at VP Irfan's response in trying to address conditions in the B building, and there's progress that needs to be done. But more than that, this is not currently a Senate concern. It is in the awareness of the Campus Affairs Committee, who would be the Senate committee to consider issues of the facilities. So a couple more things that have come through faculty governance leaders. So CUNY Council of Faculty Governance Leaders had a meeting on last Friday that I participated in. Rochelle, the chair, president of the faculty council, was also there. Is Rochelle here? I don't know.
We're alternate today.
Oh, thank you very much, Daniel, for being here. John, sorry. My apologies. I can't get the name right. Thank you, John. I know your name. So at that meeting, the Council of Faculty Governance Leaders passed a resolution unanimously asking for more faculty governance participation in the VRB, which is the Vacancy Review Board, which has been reinstated, part of this targeted savings plan for the CUNY system. The email went out, and we may hear more, we will hear more, I expect, from Patricia Tukolsky, chair of our Senate Budget and Finance Committee, about that. But one element of that plan was the immediate reinstitution of the reinstatement of the Vacancy Review Board at CUNY Central. I have only just learned there's also a Vacancy Review Board at most colleges. And the LaGuardia Vacancy Review, it's stipulated by the policy, the CUNY policy, that the Vacancy Review Board at LaGuardia includes, and at all colleges, I believe, includes the VP of Administration and Finance, who is Shahir Irfan, the Provost, Billy Gastric Rosado, and the HR, the Director of HR, which is Martha Clark. The resolution passed by the CUNY faculty governance leaders is for both the local vacancy review board at our college and the CUNY-wide one to have meaningful participation by faculty governance. I'm not sure yet what that's going to look like. The other request or recommendation in the resolution is that there be public notification of summary data regarding actions taken by the DRB. And that is for CUNY Central, but also for LaGuardia. And so I am informing you that that resolution was passed. I'd be glad to share it with you if you want. I am planning to meet with Bill H. Shahir and Marta after the cabinet meeting on Monday to just talk about how we might implement, and President Adams, and implement that resolution here at LaGuardia. I understand that the VRB mostly focuses on staff positions, does not directly usually impact faculty decisions, and faculty concerns are central with the UFS and the Council of Faculty Governance Leaders, since almost all of them are faculty, not staff. Our concern, because of the makeup of our Senate, extends to staff. So I want you to know that this is in the works. I'm not sure what form it will take, but I will get back to you with more information. Yes, question?
Comment.
Oh, comment. Yeah, and thank you. The Daniel's comment was, this was mentioned last night at UFS by Hector Batista, although he was very unclear as to what the VRB consisted of. And that is something I can, if you're interested, email me. I can send you some documents about it, just so you know what's going on. For LaGuardia, the college is in the process of hiring a couple of vice presidents and a new registrar. And all of those hirings, I mean, some are further along than others. None were far enough along to avoid being sent to the CUNY VRB. So that's where they're going. Hopefully it won't slow it down too much. You may know we need a registrar. Yes. Daniel and then Patricia.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to, if I may, just point out at the VRB, the only thing that Hector said was, for want of a better term, exempt from the VRB are the new faculty positions, you know, the 495 or whatever they are. He did not mention anything about it only being it being primarily staff, for whatever that's worth.
Thank you, Daniel. Patricia?
Yeah, it's along the same line of what Dan just said. I mean, the VRB is for everybody. It's not just for staff, it's for faculty, it's for all the lines, and whatever is done, they won't change it. So if it's done, if it's already approved, all the lectural lines, nothing's going to change up to that. So it's now immediately, it's starting immediately, but whatever is done, and if we really need somebody, the VRB usually doesn't, it's not necessarily that they would not approve it. I mean, Hugo is here. If you want more detail, I think Hugo knows more about that.
What I learned at the cabinet meeting is that any LaGuardia staff hires, and I don't know if it's a certain level, but CUNY has final approval on any offers that are made. And we are in the process of being ready to make some offers, but CUNY has not given final approval to those yet. And because of that, it's going to go to the VRB. And is that accurate, Maria? Okay. So and that includes the registrar, which, you know, we very much need, but we weren't quite far enough along to avoid it. So hopefully it won't slow it down too much. Anthony?
Just for clarification, so are there staff involved with that now? Because you're saying like the request was for more faculty input, but are there staff involved?
So so there's the local VRB, which my understanding is the purpose of the local VRB is to just prioritize what hirings are being requested. And there are not, it is 3 members of the administration.
Okay.
So that my understanding is that VRB doesn't have as much influence. They have to make a case that goes to the CUNY VRB, again, vacancy review board, and that's where they have to make a case that this hire is needed. And I think my understanding is they generally listen to reason, but it can delay the process. I mean, if you don't have a registrar, or we have an interim, for instance, that's a pretty compelling reason, but, Hugo.
I mean, I don't know if you want to hear more about this, but the VRB, ever since we've had these issues with the budget, the VRB has been existing in colleges. We're supposed to have them. I think I asked Shahir about it at one point. I don't remember what the answer was, but the biggest issue with the VRB is the fact that, okay, if you don't approve the hire of an administrator, all right, certain administrators can be more easily hired than faculty. Faculty, full-time faculty have to go through the search process, and it just takes more time. And one of the things that we have to pay particular attention to is the ratio of full-time faculty to students, which interestingly enough, during the community compact years where we were supposed to be hiring so many more faculty, it stayed flat historically. And we can expect that now, as a result of COVID, folks who've moved on and folks who are not hired, that the numbers are reversing. And this is one of the ways we're measured, and one of the ways that students determine whether they want to be here or not. So we have to be particularly careful when the VRB does not approve either allowing a line to continue or allowing new lines to continue for faculty. Obviously, administration has its own issues.
Yeah, so I see a question in the chat. Thank you for that, Hugo. From Loretta, can we request a Senate rep on the LaGuardia VRB? And that is a possibility that I want to consider, and that will be part of the meeting that I have on Monday after the cabinet meeting with the current members of the VRB. See, as I still also need to learn more about how that VRB operates, it is not in the place of the PRC, which stands for Personnel Review Committee, or our college P&B committee. So those are more influential, this one, but I will pursue that. And thank you for those comments. I just was wondering who forgot to bring the name badges. And guess who? In my office. Because I don't know your name.
This is, she's my student. She's coming to check out the Senate.
You're very brave.
Mayor,
Yeah.
Good.
Good. Maybe you'll love it so much. You'll run for a Senate seat next year. And join us as an official member. Well, so yeah, so you don't have name badges because they're hanging in the closet in my office, and it's not anyone's fault for forgetting them. So, and Hugo's added a comment up here. There was also a CUNY-wide report that had comparisons between various campuses and you're talking about the ratio of full-time to part-time faculty. Is that
Correct? Yeah, correct.
so?
I can find the last version if you want. I'll have to ask the folks at UFS to see if we can find it.
Okay, good enough. So contact me or contact Hugo. Hugo's on the executive committee of the University Faculty Senate. So he has an in with, he's very much in the center of those kinds of conversations. And we will happily get you more information. Two other issues that came up at the faculty governance leaders meeting. One is about the CUNY online initiative. One is about the transfer initiative. And I want to mention both of them to you. So there is a new CUNY-wide initiative to develop online learning programs that is complicated and running kind of parallel to the online courses that CUNY member institutions may already offer. The reason from the university faculty chair Berzani, he said it seems to be focusing on developing new courses for adult learners, especially asynchronous courses where the course doesn't meet at a set time, but you just do the work on your own time. That seems to be a focus. There are already recognized problems with who owns the course. Does CUNY own the course or the faculty member, and competition between colleges on who gets them, because it's a way to build enrollment, and that's a challenge too. So what they have said is it may seem to be first come, first serve, but also who, who says, I want to do this, but also who is best prepared to have a course or a program up and running. So that the UFS and the faculty governance leaders are engaged in saying, wait, what's going on here with this, and trying to really represent the both the individual colleges and CUNY faculty overall in this new online learning. Problems again, the integrity of the curriculum is a problem, and ownership of the curriculum is a problem, but we're aware and trying to be involved in and engaged in it. The transfer initiative, I know there were, Hugo may have sent out an email about some workshops regarding, or information sessions regarding the transfer initiative. A member of the UFS named Ludus Alatrice is organizing disciplinary working groups for the majors targeted. So there's the new CUNY provost had an aspiration for universal transfer for all CUNY colleges, that 2 years would transfer to 4 years, but she's narrowed that to start with a focus on 6 majors. Okay. So there's a list of 6 majors that will be targeted first, so that the goal is that a student who graduates with a degree in business, for instance, from a 2-year college, will be able to start at a 4-year college as a junior. Lots of complications there. But what's happened so far is that Luby Alatrice is putting together disciplinary working groups with representatives from each college that would be impacted to work on core competencies for the major. And of the 6 majors, LaGuardia offers all of them. So LaGuardia will have hopefully, for sure, a faculty representative for each of the majors. Did I write down what the majors are? Yes. Business, psychology, education, computer science, accounting, and engineering. What Luby has done is to contact department chairs for those majors and ask department chairs to identify an expert faculty member, a faculty member expert in that area, to serve on the committee and work on developing the core competencies for the major. We want to make sure that governance is involved in that process, that it's not just chairs picking and choosing somebody. So pay attention, faculty senators, pay attention to what's going on in your department. Make sure you find out who this person is. I heard a couple of colleges, their department chairs didn't get back to her at all. But I think our college, the department chairs have responded. So we want to be engaged in that as governance at LaGuardia. And Daniel, yes. Or Dan, I'm sorry. If you change your name in your Zoom screen, I'd have a better time calling you Dan.
Yeah, I don't think it will let me because it's through CUNY First.
It should. You should be able to rename yourself.
What I just wanted to clarify, someone asked last night about the intellectual property issue, and if I'm not mistaken, Hugo, you were there obviously, so do correct me if I'm wrong. That stuff on Zoom or Blackboard, it was made very clear that it is the professor's IP.
Intellectual property.
Yeah. But this was talked about, and if my memory serves me right, I believe it was made clear that someone did ask about how this would work with CUNY Online.
Okay, great. Yeah, so these concerns are being raised and heard, and hopefully we'll pursue it. Thank you for that, Dan. And are there any other questions about this before I raise one more thing? The last thing I want to raise is meeting protocol. We will have a refresher, as I mentioned, hopefully towards the end of the meeting today about new business. But as we take on potentially or very controversial issues that many people have a lot to say about, I want to try to help manage that discussion to allow voices to be heard, especially those that may not be as assertive. So my goal today, and I'm telling you to give myself permission, but also to make it clear, is that I invite anyone to speak on an issue, but once you've spoken once on an issue, we want to make sure that others have a chance to speak before you speak a second time. So choose what you have to say carefully. Get it all in there. At some point, I'm not sure I'm ready to decide this today. But at some point, we may want to just set a time limit for discussion so that we all agree that for perhaps, and again, this children on campus policy is going to be the main question. I mean, if we want to have a discussion for 30 minutes and then wind it down then, and I'm not sure that we need to do that today because we're not yet ready to debate the policy. But I do want to say I'm going to try to call on people in the order in which they get my attention to speak, and make sure that everyone has a turn before anyone gets a second turn to speak. So that's the last thing I had in my chair's report today. Next on the agenda are committee reports. Committee on committees, and again, as a reminder for committee chairs, if you have no report, it's absolutely fine. It is fine to say no report. If you have no report, you don't even need to be here unless you're a senator, in which case we'd like you to be here. But so just to clarify that, committee on committees, chairs, I know you're on Zoom. Do you have a report today?
Nothing to report, thanks.
Okay. The curriculum committee, as you can tell from the agenda, there is no curriculum today, and we don't need Priyantha to come to the meeting, so he is not present, the chair of the curriculum committee. Academic standing committee, Lilith Tope is going to discuss with us the academic calendar for academic year 23-24, but she is not able to come until about 3:30 today, so we are going to move her towards the end of the meeting. Wouldn't that be, maybe it'll be the end of the meeting, maybe not. Well, I feel no obligation to keep you the entire 2 hours or 15 minutes. So I will make sure I'm writing a reminder to make sure I remember Willa. By the way, there were 2 other matters that the academic standing committee presented in January that we tabled for our next meeting. They are not yet ready to be discussed or put forward because the academic standing committee is going to meet about them yet, but we will return to those matters at our next meeting, which is March 29th. Committee on Campus Affairs. Evelyn and Anthony.
Are we doing the calendar under academic standing or no?
We'll do the calendar under academic standing.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that's,
no,
Lila's
but
not
we had to pass it. Lila's not here.
oh, okay.
Lila is actually, because we rescheduled this meeting, Lila is presenting to our department about advising right now. So she has a very real reason to not be here.
So I thought it might be a good idea if we have the policy, just to sort of, anyone who doesn't have it with them can see it on the screen. But also we wanted to highlight a couple of other things and we'll go into that. But as you all know, the policy has been discussed in full.
This is not gonna be shared.
Can you all on Zoom, can you see?
They could see it.
Yeah, oh.
They
okay.
can't.
Okay.
Can you share, can you email me and then I can share, or one of us, and we can share the
Or
screen?
share the Zoom screen.
Can you do it on there?
Yeah, we can try. Yeah, let me clarify one thing. Yeah, let's wait until they can see it. I want to remind you that our goal today is not to debate this policy. Our goal today is for you to understand the policy as proposed, so that then you can take it to your constituents and share it with them, seek feedback. We're going to pass that feedback back to the co-chairs of academic campus affairs, and they are going to do one more revision or evaluation based on that feedback. So our goal today is not to debate the policy, but just to clarify the policy so that we're ready to share it with constituents. The debate will come on March 29th when we prepare to vote.
More debate. So, so as I was saying, we have looked at this policy for quite some time now. The committee, Campus Affairs Committee, took what Martha had presented and we went over it and we reviewed, I want to say about 32 different policies, both CUNY, SUNY and private. And we came up with what we thought would be a fair policy that both prevented any liability of the campus, but also didn't hinder the employees in any way, right? So obviously that was presented both at Senate, it was sent back to Campus Affairs. We held a meeting, I want to say it was February 2nd, where we invited all of the college community to come and share their concerns and give us some feedback. I think we had close to 38 people present at that meeting. After that, we took all of that feedback, and I just want to say that we only received 3. We received three different types of revisions, right, for different parts of the policy. We received something from ACE, we received obviously Sherry, and we received something from Rebecca. So what we did in our last meeting is we literally went line by line. So I kind of want to give you an understanding of what we were doing. Line by line, anything that the committee members or any of the feedback that was given to us, and they weren't in agreement and they had other suggestions, we voted on those suggestions. And the policy that we sent out on February 16th was literally the revision of everything that passed. So the policy that all the senators received that Christy and Jill sent out was the final policy, and that was after going one line by line. In addition to that, like I said before, we reviewed 32 different policies. We did more research. We went back and tried to find anything that was that may show, you know, if there was something about this topic discussed before, and we actually did find something. It was interesting because when we were reviewing these policies, we had noted that I believe it was Hostos who referred to a policy that CUNY had. Well, CUNY did have a policy, and I'll show you in here, that was reviewed in February of 2011. So this policy, and then we found another document where Senate had actually entertained this policy. Our Senate, LaGuardia Senate, back into 2011. So the policy of children on campus is nothing new. It's not something that came just from Marta's email. It was actually something that has been in discussion for a very long time. So I wanted to share that with you, but I also want to share with you, you know, obviously the stakeholders, what the changes are to the policies. One of the recommendations that was made was to include the inclusions first, and simply because people may not read the whole policy. So they would confuse the visitors with, you know, the employee and the students. We separated the policy so that the policy would be clear for students and can be posted with the students handbook. It could be posted on any of the student websites that's really focused for students, and then separated the employee, right? Faculty and staff, because theirs was a little bit slightly different. What we ended up with basically was an introduction and a purpose that was common on both the student and the faculty and staff. And then the responsibilities that fell on the employee, on the managers, and for students that fell on the students and the faculty. And you will notice that a lot of it is very similar. One of the things that we did do away was the approval, having this online approval of your supervisors, and that's for the employees. But they would be required, both students and employees would be required to sign in their child when they first enter the building. When we reviewed the policy that was approved, of the policy that was presented both in LaGuardia Senate back in 2011 and CUNY's, they were very similar to what we have come up with in this policy. So if you look at it, I'm just gonna highlight kind of the major changes, right? The major changes for no longer would you be required to have an online form, but you do have to sign them in. Students, this is for students. Students still need the approval for the instructor to be able to bring their children online. Obviously, supervision is definitely something that has to happen at all times. And we didn't really define exactly time frame, right? But what we did do is make sure that, because one of the key points that we noticed in all the policies was this repetitive action of bringing your children on campus, right? So we defined that and we mentioned that here. And pretty much everything else I think was very simple. It's just kind of saying your child comes on campus because of an exception to the rule. That's not the rule. And you have to basically make sure that your child is supervised when that happens. And that applies for both students and staff and faculty. So the idea today was to present that. I think you all have a copy of that. I just wanna, and we can send this to you as well. Can't seem to get to the next page. I just want to show you both the CUNY policy. So so this is the CUNY policy, and we can share a copy of that draft. Again, basically highlighting the same, pretty much the same thing back in 2011. And if you look at this one here, this is LaGuardia's copy of Senate back in 2011. And interesting enough, I don't know if you can read it. It was actually brought to the Senate by students. It wasn't brought to the Senate by administration or faculty. It was actually brought on by students. So that's really all we have right now. Well, like Christy said, this is to go back to all of your constituents, and we'd love to hear from you. If there's anything else that we need to revise, we'd be happy to do that.
So this is not primarily revision now, but
Right.
if there's anything that needs clarity, clarity is good, and questions for your understanding. So I'm open to questions. I received one by email from someone who's not able to be here today. But
Can I just add?
yes,
some-
go ahead.
Just to clarify, what Evelyn's talking about with the CUNY policy and the one that was brought to the Senate. Because I've been on the Senate for a long time, and I actually was looking at my paperwork, and that's when I found all this stuff from 2011. So CUNY had a policy draft. The student wrote something. Because it looks like every CUNY school started thinking about it in 2011, because this is when CUNY came up with a policy. CUNY never finalized that policy, apparently, because I looked online repeatedly, and I see that the committee, the CUNY Risk Management Council discussed it. And then they said that the policy will be shared with council members for feedback, and it's under review. And I never saw anything after that, at least from what I could find online. So it looks like CUNY never actually acted upon it. But in the interim, it was brought to our Senate. There was discussion. It was tabled until the next meeting. The chair at the time saw that CUNY had a policy in motion and said, look, this is gonna be moot. We're not making a decision on it because CUNY is gonna have a policy. So the Senate never voted on it either.
Right.
So just to clarify, if none of this was actually voted on, but again, the language is very similar to what we came up with now. And just to clarify, because I know there's been a lot of, well, this is coming from here, this is coming from here. Back then, it was the committee of students that wrote the policy. So that was looking at it mostly from a student side, but then also including employees, as opposed to fast forward to 2023, where we were looking at it from an employee side and including students. So it's very interesting how it kind of mirrored. So I just wanted to put that out there, and that's what we found, and I apologize for not finding it earlier. Because, you know, we had all this discussion back and forth, and like, oh, wait a minute, I knew we discussed it at some point. And we, we all knew that this, we had, at least those of us that have been on the Senate for a while, we said, we did talk about this at some point, but, that's what we found.
So I see a question from Sherry. I'm not sure which policy that came from the student. It's in the minutes. They didn't bring a policy, they
This one.
brought in.
Yeah,
No, I don't know if the students drafted. I think the students brought
brought an
the need
issue up,
for, yeah.
and then someone else.
But we can share the minutes with all of you. We'll send it to
Yeah.
Christie.
I mean, I can read I have the minutes from those two Senate meetings. If
Let's
you want me
not
to read
get,
that, please. Okay.
let's not get buried in that,
Right.
because what we need to clarify is this current revised policy. Patricia, I see that hand.
I just want to say that this is a good example of what happens when we have good shared governance, where everybody participates, people go back, it's challenging, it's complicated, but at the end, we come to a consensus and with a policy that will probably satisfy everybody. So I think we need to take time and then do the work that needs to be done and not be pushed by time ideas that don't mean much, except that we want it done. But taking the time to discuss, to go back, to consult is difficult, but I think the results are worth it. So thank you to everybody who was involved, because this seems the policy that everyone should be able to rally behind.
Thank you, Patricia. I see that hand, Cindy. Go ahead, and then John is next.
Thanks. I just wondered if the campus affairs people could go through any major differences between employees and students policies, because I looked at it, but it looked very similar and I wasn't sure if it was just like they just used the word employee instead of student, or if there were actual policy differences, you know what I mean?
Thank you, Christy. So the major difference between the employee and the students originally was in the process of getting approval, right? Employees were required to get approval online. That was very difficult to implement for students, simply because a student would need 3 or 4 different professors to approve it. So that was the major difference. And one of the things that came out from our last meeting was by removing that approval, that online process of approval, right? We could actually share the same process. The student, faculty member or staff member could come in, sign in their children. One thing that we did discover, and I think it's important to kind of mention, we're not saying that you don't need approval. We're not saying that you do need approval. It does talk about the responsibility of the manager. But one of the things that we did notice in the prior policy that was back in 2011 that was on the table in Senate was that there does need to be a approval. It doesn't define how that approval process is with the managers, right? With your supervisors. Again, in the CUNY policy, it also states that it should be a conversation and it should be approved. So I think that's one of the major differences.
And students need to get faculty approval to bring a child into a
Into the
classroom,
right.
but not just on campus. John and then Maria?
Yeah, super quick question. I'm just wondering, is the PowerPoint available? Was it on the email for the agenda or something?
No,
No, we
what
can
is it?
send it to you.
That would be
Yeah.
super great then. Thank you.
great.
And we could even send the minutes for the 2011, where the students brought it over.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, Maria.
Mine is just a correction on the students version. So the last part, it says the college reserves the right to ask an employee to leave campus if the employee is not adhering to the above policy. That should be student. But that's one.
Good point. Are there other, well, the question I received by email, well, actually first, let me say this. I noticed that in the exclusion, the first exclusion, maybe the second one too, there's a little bit of a wording confusion that that I think we can easily change. So let me talk to you. In fact, I don't have it in front of me or I would read it, but I think instead of it says to be changed from well, not allowed to, well. Oh, there we go. Yeah, there's, the wording is, these guidelines do not apply to children and family members from being on campus. These do not apply to children and family members who are on campus, to just to change that wording to who are instead of from being makes, clarifies that. And it might be in the second exclusion too, and on both documents. So it's just a wording issue. I'd say you're an English professor. But
That's my segment. Never even noticed, Evelyn.
the question that came from, by email, from someone who's not able to be here, a senator who's not able to be here today, is a concern, and this was raised before, and perhaps you hopefully discussed it with your committee, a concern about the sightline supervision. If how that's gonna be enforced, because if a mother of a 10-year-old boy has to go to the restroom,
So I remember
do
that.
they bring the 10-year-old boy into the women's, so that question.
Yes, so that was actually the example we thought about very deeply, and one of the things that we came up with to change it from sight on, what is it, sight or, right, sight or
Or
sight and sound, something like that, sight or sound. That was the change that we made.
Which
So
actually,
sight and sound.
we weren't sure about the language of that too, and that's something, because one of the committee members actually brought up, which we hadn't even thought about at that point, was, is that language offensive to somebody in our hearing impaired or visually impaired community, whether they be faculty, staff, or students? So, we were using the sight and sound originally, so I don't know if there's a better terminology for that. That's something maybe, looking at legal and diversity, maybe there's some other.
I'm over here, like, there's certain things that I think that you can't get around. And this may be one of them.
That's why we left it, because we weren't sure, but that, that was.
Still struggling with sound, to be quite honest. Because. So if I'm listening to my kid from wherever. Okay, and my kid's doing something, exactly how am I monitoring them?
So thank you for that, and I have an answer for you. So the idea, it's not exclusive to sight and sound. There's another bullet point that says the child must be supervised at all times. So it's both of those things. You're supervising your child, you can hear your child, you can see your child.
So if you, okay, I'm sorry, no, we're not. I'm sorry. No, because I'm just trying to talk you through, since we're in practical application, right? If there is a bullet under it that explains, that's basically a catch-all, right? What's the necessity for the language?
Well, it's not a bullet underneath it, it's just another part of the
But that's what I'm saying,
responsibility.
if you have a catch-all that says, so, okay, to change it up. If I write a phrase that says, the whole circle is covered, right? There's no need for me to say this piece of the pie is also covered, right? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
and that would take, if that's the case, it would take that issue away about the language. Do you see what where I'm going with it? So, yeah, so if you're, so when you use, if you're gonna choose the language I think you should use is the more inclusive language, meaning where it covers, it must be supervised at all times and the whole site.
I think when we discussed it in the committee, supervised was a little more vague in the sense of how do you define supervised? So that's why we had said site originally. And that's why we kind of put those two together. So that was,
Right, and I go
that was our
back,
thinking.
I go back to a lot of the policies that we saw explicitly said line of supervision.
So
They
you
didn't say
are saying
sounds,
that
but we included.
being supervised means if you can hear your child, he or she is supervised.
And I
That's what you are
agree
saying.
with that, exactly. I
Yeah,
agree
that's
with the fact that if you can hear your child. Cause I could be in a different room and hear my child.
So I'm gonna redirect
And
a little bit.
feedback.
What we're working on is making, is making sure this language is clear.
Yes.
And there are, I'm just gonna point out some comments in the chat, and then Daniel gets it, or Dan, I'm sorry, gets a turn. Let's see, Sherry has pointed out in the chat, she is present in the room, but is taking advantage of the chat to not take up meeting time or wait for me to call on her. Good job, Sherry. That, yeah, right. Sherry said, she's added some additional language to clarify in the case of students, such approval is not required to enter campus, but is required to enter a classroom with the child. For students that might,
So that was already voted on. They
that,
are required to enter the campus. And
wait, they don't, but they don't need faculty approval to enter the campus?
no,
Right,
No,
that's what
each
she's
day,
saying.
right.
That's what she's saying.
Clarifying a question before that, right? That Dan asked,
Yeah,
I think.
right.
I have the chat open here,
And
too.
Rebecca also pointed out the wording problem that needed, that I already pointed out, just giving you credit, Rebecca. Thank you, good job. So I will ask, I will send you the chat here,
so we can respond.
so you can respond, and ultimately, at this point, what we just need, we need a cleaned up final version of the documents that we share with our constituents within the next couple of days
Okay.
after this meeting. And the question is if supervision is sufficient, or we need to specify sight and sound. Must be supervised at all times, and I think that, and it may be enough. Dan had his hand up a while ago, so Dan, what did you want to add?
So I just wanted to say a couple things. First of all, just huge thanks to Anthony and Evelyn for continuing the great work that you guys are doing on this. I wanted to clarify two things. Because one thing I could unfortunately see happening is that if a student comes in and they say to security, "Hi, I'm bringing my child to class," assuming, let's say, for instance, without wanting to get too bogged down in hypotheticals and minutiae, I could just see security giving them a hard time. So I'm wondering if something should be put in there, saying that a student does not need to show anything to security in order to bring their child on campus. And then the second thing I wanted to say about, I don't honestly see why we need to say in sight and sound or in proximity or anything more than under supervision. I think if we say under supervision, it is both clear, but it also provides enough wiggle room for different situations.
Their feedback, Wendy, and then,
Can I just respond to Dan before?
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate the kind words, and I agree, under supervision does basically showcase that, but there was so much debate between how people or how a parent may view supervision, what the definition was of supervision. It may mean different things to different people, and that was one of the reasons we included the sight and sound, okay, in the document. But like I said, we're open to hearing from the college community. And then in terms of students coming in without having to sign something, the other reason for that is in case, and we were again thinking of safety, in case there is an accident, the only way of knowing how many students, how many children may still be on campus was to have them sign it.
so students would sign their children in like employees would sign
Right,
their
just like
children in.
employees would do.
But students don't need faculty permission to bring the child on campus, only to bring the child into.
Right. And then after this policy is approved, the idea is that we will go back, post this wherever it needs to be posted, and then do some training with our campus safety. So I would say at that point, I think it's pretty safe to say that they shouldn't have that issue. And if they do have that issue, that they would be able to basically, inform the officer, I'm sorry, there's a policy that says that I can't. And show them where that policy is. So I think that's one way to sort of make sure that the experience that they walk into the campus is a welcome. And then I think we had some
Great,
questions. from-
yes, Wendy?
So I think we might need to look a little bit more critically about the use of sight and sound versus supervision, because it sounds to me as if we're thinking of a younger adult with a small child. But if you have a student, an adult student who might have a teenager, I don't need to take my 16, well, I don't have a 16-year-old, I don't need to take my 16-year-old to the bathroom with me, nor do I need to go to the bathroom with that 16-year-old, so they're not going to be in sight and sound. Right,
That
so
was
that
a
we,
big debate.
That's what I said.
Yeah, no, that was discussed and
And it was a big debate.
That was one of the big debates. And again, we go back to legally, where does that put the college? If your 16-year-old fell down the stairs
Yeah.
or 12.
Uh,
the same place.
Someone else had a question.
Yeah, Maria. Oh, Sabine, I'm sorry.
Clarify the reason why the explanation for sight and sound was the combination is what you said in the exact example that went to me was a 13-year-old. How do I monitor a parent talking about a child who's 13 and different sex, and they go to the bathroom and take them with me? Do I not take them with me? So then if you're in sound, you can hear the child in the bathroom.
Right.
So, as co-chairs of your committee, you get to decide what goes in the version we'll share. Jill,
Very
yes,
quickly, is there a word that we can add to supervision that will allow us to take away the sight and sound stipulation, but will reinforce the type of supervision that we are looking for? Close supervision, attentive supervision. Maybe there's, again, not the English professor, but maybe there's a word that can go there that can reinforce the importance of strict supervision without having to go to the sight and sound.
So as you remember, you were in that meeting, we went back and
Right,
forth.
yeah.
So if
Age
anyone,
appropriate sound,
which one?
age
age
appropriate,
appropriate.
because then it addresses, the instance that you raised. So the 16-year-old versus say the 9-year-old.
Age appropriate
Uh,
supervision.
Yeah.
Age
Send it to feedback. Now, what words you come up
Age
with?
is not always indicative of maturity.
Just kind of thinking of how we can kind of put it together. We can say on the supervision, including sign, sound and vision, or whatever you had it as, and but not limited to that. Something like that.
Including but not limited to.
That's not limited.
That's a great, that's all a great phrase.
But that's how you can kind of consider it.
Total full responsibility? Well, what Sherry said in the chat is that the guardian takes full responsibility for the direct supervision of their child.
Can they have a friend supervise their kid?
If they take full responsibility for direct supervision of their child.
there is a line that says for the, especially for the employees, that you can't have someone else, because that was part of the discussion. You go to the office and you ask one of the other staff to watch
Yeah.
your child while you're in the bathroom. No, that's a no-no.
All right, I am,
Question. I want to know what is age appropriate?
right, that's
So
what,
that's
What is
the
that? Like,
problem.
what does that mean? Because you can have a 16-year-old who isn't mentally capacitated or can,
Yeah.
or is aware.
age appropriate.
Right, age appropriate, so like a 16-year-old may not have the same mental thinking of a 9-year-old that probably doesn't have the same exact problems that 16-year-old has. So what is age appropriate?
I am going to, good point.
Yeah.
Definitely. Are there any other clarifying questions for you to understand the policy as written right now, acknowledging a couple of typos or, wording changes, and maybe a reconsideration of the sight and sound and full responsibility? Yes, Sabine.
So we're doing away with having to get permission to enter campus with the child for students.
Sign in.
Okay, so if a student needs to go into a classroom, they still need to get permission from the faculty, but what if it's like a study day? That a student is not going into a classroom, but still would like to enter on campus and will be on campus with that child. Hypothetically, if a situation happens, it still does land us in the same place, but there's no permissions needed.
But they would be sent into open areas, the library, they, would, you know, wherever they're going would be an open area, like that. That would be covered by just letting them walk through as a visitor with the parent supervision.
Yeah,
Sure.
and we can technically.
Sherry,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, that if a student were to come to campus with a child, not with the intention of attending a class, going into a classroom with the child, then really they would be a visitor to the campus.
Correct.
Just like any other visitor.
Right.
And so then they would fall under the visitor policy, which is something that I think the Senate should look at. Maybe separately after this is over, we should look at the visitor policy and see what exactly is it, what's in it. I haven't been able to find it.
We're like a public, so because CUNY, because we're a public institution, we are like a public library. So that's why anybody that has an ID, just like you show the ID to get into a library, you can go into any of CUNY campuses with an ID. It's the same, which is why, like,
Like
so.
children would need to be signed in by.
Exactly, exactly, they would have, but they would have to be signed in by somebody that does have an ID that's saying, okay, this is why they're there, so we can't block people from being on our campus because we are a public university.
I am going to bring this to a close. Thank you, Maria, for your contribution, and Sherry for your question. It's a good point, and this does reference the visitors policy, so that's something that I think can just make sure we're clear on, and if it's not adequate, we can address it later. So what Leslie, our parliamentarian, is going to present offer some parliamentary procedure, but I first want to say you've gotten a little bit more feedback. There are a few things that should be clarified in the policy. You are going to send it to us. Today is Wednesday, the 22nd. By Friday, can you send it? Send it to me. I'll make sure I share it with senators. Then I want to propose a date by which senators will send constituency feedback back to these co-chairs and me. And my suggestion is March 16th, which is the day after department meetings, I believe. That's only one day after department meetings, but I am hoping then you can schedule a meeting of the Campus Affairs Committee for a couple of days after that, so that the 17th would be ideal, so that you would have time to address any more concerns, and we can get a final version of the proposed policy to senators in time to discuss, debate and vote on it at our March 29th meeting. So did you write that date down?
Yes.
March 16th.
Yes, Mom.
I am a teacher. Make sure you've got that date down, and March 16th is when feedback from constituents for at-large senators. You don't have clear constituencies, so if you know people and you want to say, hey, what do you think about this? Or you can contribute, but you do not have the same task as those who represent a particular area at the college. Leslie.
Thanks, Christy. Just as a reminder, the next step in this process, is for the Senate to vote. And so there should be a motion to approve the policy, a second. And then the discussion is a pro or con of the policy as written. So it's not a debate again about content. So your role as a member of this body is to make sure that you know as best as you can how your constituency would like you to vote. The way I presented it at my department meeting was that, I am not the only voter in the business and technology department. So if anyone had strong feelings about me voting something down, we need to share that and discuss that. So that's what the next step is. It's again, not to make changes. It's not to voice personal opinion. It's to look at the document as presented and understand how your constituency feels. Do they want to accept this policy or not? And that's really where we're going from here. Thanks.
And thank you, Leslie. And I would add, you are voting the way your constituency would like to, but you can also think about it as our elected representatives in government. You as senators have a fuller explanation and discussion of the rationale for the policy than all of our constituents. So you can still also listen to your constituents' concerns, but they have elected you as senator to make your own decision as well. So it's a balance there. It's not that, we are attempting to educate ourselves about this policy, what it takes, what's involved, in ways that our constituents aren't able to because they're not here in Senate discussion. So bear that in mind too, and that is for March 29th meeting.
Thank
Good.
you.
Thank Anthony and Evelyn, thank you so much, and any
Thank
members
you.
of the academic committee. All right, back to committee reports. Lila is now here with Academic Standing Committee.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Do you want me to pull, or
Do I have a copy of the calendar?
you have a copy of the calendar?
No, I don't.
I can
Here.
find it and put it on
There's one there, but
Yes.
that's okay.
our screen.
Okay.
I will share my screen. Hopefully. I think.
You depend on the calendar.
It depends on the calendar.
I feel like I'm always here to defend.
Yes,
No, I'm
yes, you
kidding.
are.
I'm just a messenger. I'm just a messenger. I'm just a messenger. I didn't make it. I didn't revise it.
I am gonna try to have this
Okay.
on the screen. We'll see how it goes. There we go.
All right. I'm just gonna say a couple of things so that you have the context here for this calendar and how it came about. You all know, probably most of you know, right, that is the registrar's office who makes this calendar, not Academic Standing Committee, Durban and the people that Durban works with. And so an original version of this was sent to us. Erica knows very well. We looked at it. We had some feedback. Erica was one of those who pointed out a few issues. Dion Miller pointed out some issues. And so then we sent it back. We decided, no, it was not ready to be voted on as yes. There were too many tentative dates on it and so on. So we sent it back with the feedback. I have to give credit to Durban. He really tried his best to fix everything that he could, get the dates, as many of the dates final as possible. And then there were certain things that he could not address. There are CUNY dates in there that unfortunately cannot be changed. We have to go with what CUNY is umbrella calendar says. And so he added a little note. There was a concern about a Monday finals, and he added a note there. That's the best he could do, but because again, the CUNY calendar didn't allow for substantial changes. And so then it came back to us and we felt a lot better about it, and we voted yes on it. So that's how it got here. The Academic Standing Committee reviewed it and considers this as a acceptable calendar for 2023-2024. I want to say a couple of things about the tentative dates that you see. You've never seen that before, right? So I asked Durban, why do we have tentative dates? And which we have never seen before. Well, to his downfall, Durban is trying to be more transparent than Burnham was. It turns out that there were always tentative dates on the calendar, except Burnham never indicated that we were tentative. And so after it was approved, they just changed it as needed. He also told me there is always change to the calendar because CUNY Central changes things and then they have to adapt. So this is, as much as we would like it to be the absolute final calendar, it's not going to be until the beginning of 2023-2024. So if you see tentative there, we fixed all the tentative days that were really serious and we got all the information we could. Christmas 2020, it's the reason why it's tentative because CUNY Central hasn't officially said yet that those are, so he can't put it in as final. So that's where the tentative comes from. We're not worried, we were not worried about the ones that stayed in there. So that's the context for it. That being said, I'm happy to, it's up for the Senate to decide.
Sandra who's on Zoom raised, wants to ask a question.
Yes.
Sandra, go ahead.
Hi, so in my department, I'm part of the math, engineering, computer science department. So I received feedback from someone in my department, because last fall we had a discussion about, some strange things with the calendar. So I think so he also sent it to Chrissy this morning, but I don't know if Chrissy received it. So he has problem with some, like, the number of Mondays distributed in fall 2.
Leslie actually, and she long ago, and probably I didn't let Sandra know. But before this was essential discussion, I brought that issue over via email. I think last semester.
Okay, and so.
And I checked them and they are better this semester.
Yeah.
In regards.
Sandra, go ahead.
Yeah, so his suggestion was that, like, some of the irregular days should be earlier in the semester. So for example, in spring 1, the irregular day of Wednesday, May 22nd, should be an earlier in the term rather than later in the term, so that the absences are minimized late in the term. That's one suggestion. And another thing was concern was about the distribution of Mondays in the fall 2 calendar.
Okay. So I'm very happy that I saw that email as well, and I have
Okay.
time to actually contact Durban, because of course it is not in our purview to change the academic standing committee. So I did my best and I contacted Durban, and I have printed out the email that he sent. So I'm just going to read this email. The regular days are quote unquote inherited from the CUNY Central calendar. And those are some of the days that we cannot change, nor would we want to. All of the colleges follow the CUNY Central calendar, and as a result, all of the different university software application systems that we all use are also coded with those dates. I am not even sure how or why we would even go about getting a waiver, which was part of it. It's not possible to get a waiver for that date. So as awkward as fall 2 is, it looks like the dates have been coded from CUNY Central, and it is not something that we can change. For spring 1, that irregular day, he did not get back to me about, and I didn't have time to go back and forth. It is, so the feedback from last year, I think they really took into account, and I can tell you that Durban has worked very, very hard to make this, it's as the feedback provider, who remains anonymous, I guess, themselves acknowledged, there are just a lot of holidays that fall on a Monday. It's just an unfortunate, it's just an unfortunate coincidence that's not going to be repeated. And so there is just not a lot we can do about it. Spring 1, that irregular, they could potentially be moved earlier. I can ask him about that. I understand I understand the rationale, but it does not strike me as a rationale strong enough to throw back the calendar and then to for another set of voting. Yeah. But this is a little bit, yes, this is a little bit better, but I can bring that to his attention and see if that's possible. So that's the answer.
Loretta has a hand up, and then Maria. Loretta, go ahead.
Hi, when Derwin says that we inherit this, CUNY Central is adamant that the 12-6 schools, ourselves, Kingsborough, Gutman, are following the same holiday schedule. So they're stuck with the same horrible irregular days that we have.
Okay.
So it's not a LaGuardia based activity. I think like those dates aren't. And so I'm just sharing that with you.
Great. Thank you, Loretta, Maria, and then Anthony.
This is really quick. We're on Juneteenth, I'm looking at the night, June 19th. It doesn't like, so there, it's not in that semester, I think it's further, it's in 24 year.
Right, it's
We're
right.
saying
that
like
is-
the last day, no, it says the college is closed there, but
Yeah.
isn't that's for this current year? But for that year, yeah, right there,
So then June 19th,
The
the
college
college
is
up
closed.
again.
there, so.
The college is closed, and here is last day to apply for readmission for session 2.
So how are we making it the
So
last
how
day
is
to
that
apply
holiday?
when the college is closed?
If I may,
Loretta has a response, and I have already confessed to our parliamentarian that we are having a lot of discussion without, oh yeah, we are clarifying. There's no motion on the floor yet. So I think-
yeah, yes, point of clarification or point of
Clarification.
point of information. I forget whichever one's appropriate. Those are purely electronic activities. They are web driven. They can still be recorded on that day and they'll be acted on when we are actually open on the 20th.
You should say it on that too.
We can trust. Yeah, Anthony, what do you want to say?
Just a question about graduation. I mean, I know still says tentative. I don't think we've ever really done a graduation on a Friday. What is that? Is it because usually it's like Tuesday or Thursday? Is that Friday is what we're really looking at?
It's a tentative.
Okay.
It's a 10.
It might change, it has not been, I think.
Oh, I know, I
it's-
just, like I said, I mean, it's usually been Tuesday or Thursday, so I just didn't know if that was accurate. Okay.
Remember, June 18th also, the closure of June 19th also, created some difficulties for
Right.
us last year, so that's why it's a tentative.
Gotcha.
Wendy,
So does that also change the tentative, the first day of spring too, to go to the 20th? Which would be classes starting again before graduation, I thought we had changed that.
classes start on the 20th and graduation is on the 21st.
Right, reading day was what we changed.
But classes usually start before graduation.
Well, there's a big gap between reading day and graduation now. It used to be closer.
Yeah.
It used to be only a couple of days.
I think, I'm sorry, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think it's within the same section. Within the same session, so this is session 2, so people who are taking that session 2, they're not graduating.
Right.
But how about the professors that are teaching? They can attend graduation.
They can't attend graduation.
If it's a Friday, I guess they can't attend graduation, I guess. That's true, but in terms of the graduation and the first day, last day, it's a different session, so it does not impact people who are graduating. It was within this, sometimes within the same session, we would have the graduation come before finals. That's what happened, and that was a major issue.
Yeah, that was true. Yeah.
But people, can go to graduation ceremony and graduate session too, so that's.
Yeah, but they would not, because they would have to, graduation would have to be in August then. To accommodate that.
No, I'm just saying, if it's.
You allow. Our students to walk and reading out.
I think,
Yeah.
So, so there's a question about the date of graduation. It is in this calendar listed as tentative anyway. The things we don't like about this calendar can't be changed because they're from CUNY Central. I had always blamed LaGuardia, but now I know. They're so crazy about this school, I know. So are there any other clarifying questions?
and of course, I'm happy to bring this back to Durban as well, so there's something that can be done since it's tentative. But I think also the graduation ceremony committee also has a plan, because it depends on how they can organize it, when it can happen, so there's a lot that goes on. But I bring this back to Durban too,
You,
as well as the regular day.
remind me of your.
Donnie.
Donnie's, that's
Yeah,
right. Hello,
thank you.
Donnie.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
So what I was gonna say is that June 21st, I remember last year around that time. That was actually one of the first summer Fridays. I know, nothing is set in stone and that is all tentative,
Good point.
right? But I don't know about you, but if we have law,
Yeah, it's usually it coincides with the 6 week
Summer
session.
Fridays, yeah.
Yes.
or
So,
optimal.
so there's question about the graduation.
Yeah,
Is this in sufficient form to bring to a vote? Loretta, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, students who are registered intent to grad for spring 2023 only get to go to the June ceremony, even if they are enrolled in session 2 classes. That's one. Two, if we remember the resolution that the Senate passed at the behest of the Committee of Students, was that graduation takes place after the last day of finals. That was the request.
The senator thing that, yes.
All right, so those are just the two things. So, and Denise, to your point, it is the last Friday of June that is the first Friday off. So the 21st is not the last Friday in June.
There's one more. Okay. Yes, Evelyn.
Thank you, Sabrina, and I was gonna say, the date is very tricky. Our first meeting is scheduled, I believe, for next week. The 18th, the following date is the 19th, where the college is closed. So we're trying to find, some way, and this is why the 21st is sensitive.
Okay. So work is happening on nailing down that date.
And again, just to clarify, in the past, the calendars that you have passed when Bergen was at the rest, they did make changes afterwards. So, you know, this could be just a change. We could bring, I'm wondering now if maybe the first day of classes could be on the Friday and then graduation could be on a Thursday, 20th. Just, well, just the two. Graduation Thursday, first day of classes.
It depends on where we're holding it.
Exactly, and when it's available,
So,
exactly.
We are looking, possibly it will be Queens College, but we're also exploring other venues.
So there's question about that. You've had only a few days to look at this calendar. However, Lila's committee, the Academic Standing Committee, has reviewed it and has a representative from every academic department, along with a few other people. Is this ready for a vote? Do we want to vote to send it back to Academic Standing? And
We don't want to. So I'm just gonna say, if we send it back, it's going to be a month. Because we have to, you know, they have to review it, we have to vote, you have to meet again. Unless there are major issues.
Can we pass the conditions? Like.
It will change.
It depends what the motion on the floor is. So Lila, while I appreciate your hesitancy to have this come back to your committee, if someone moves and we approve it, that's the process. So I know it delays things, but be very careful to,
so if we have
I guess appreciate the process.
motion on the floor, we can have some debate about the motion, pro and con. Yes.
Only about the motion. So if the motion on the floor is that we approve the calendar as is, then we're proing and conning really approving the calendar. So the pros and cons might be, yes, I'm comfortable with the tentativeness. I'm not comfortable with the tentativeness. If the motion on the floor is we vote to send it back to Academic Standing, then we pro and con that process. So someone might say, no, that'll delay it. Yes. So that's where we are. The clarifying question, this is what's on the table.
Right, is this calendar.
But to be clear, if we vote to approve it as we've done in the past, they can still make changes on those tentative days anyway. We don't need to vote to say with tentative changes or something like that, right?
Right.
Because they always do that anyway, so.
Uh,
So I move to approve the calendar for.
Motion to approve the calendar. And second, Lucy? Lucy seconds. Discussion. Now, this is discussion pro or for or against. You need to identify if you're arguing for or against approving this calendar. Any discussion?
Anthony gets right of first refusal.
Anthony, want to say anything first?
No, it needs to be approved at some point.
It needs to be approved. at some
And we're getting it earlier than in previous years, so
point.
thank you.
That is a statement for.
I don't see any big reason not to approve it.
Lucy's argument is she sees no reason not to.
There's no reason not to. And the more we approve it, the better it is for the faculty, the students, establishing earlier, making the plans earlier and everything else. Delaying is not good.
All right, any other discussion for or against the motion to approve the calendar?
Patricia has her hand up.
I can't see her. Thank you, Patricia.
I'm not in favor of that motion. I think that we can't rush things and we can't decide that maybe the graduation is tentative because it depends on where we can have graduation. If people can't attend graduation or graduation is at a time when we're already in session, I don't think it's a right precedent to go with.
All right, Patricia's spoken against the motion. Leslie.
Yeah, I'm also speaking against the motion because the idea of rushing through tentativeness, even if we're not the final say, leaves me a little bit uncomfortable, particularly with the lack of statement that the college is closed on Juneteenth. I don't like the idea of rushing through today. So I would vote against the motion.
All right. Any other discussion?
I'm also against it for that reason, and also because the new student orientation comes after opening session. So from a logistical standpoint, that doesn't really serve campus life when it comes to planning. So I think we should wait.
So another change.
I just want to make one point. So
Yeah,
Lucy,
Lucy,
I'll
are you speaking against the motion?
No, I'm not. I'm just making a point, like discussion,
Okay.
hopefully a clarification. When do you see that option though? When do you see that option so that we are working towards it? So when is the day that is best for us? If we do know that, we don't need to rush it. Because we can wait.
We, what option are you asking about? What?
The option for the graduation date. So what the changes? Pretty much.
When would we know about the graduation date in order to have a firm calendar? To approve, is that what you're asking?
I'm asking about the best choice for us to be satisfied with the movement. Okay, so that's all.
Evelyn?
I have a question. Because it seems like the only available dates that you could possibly hold graduation
Yeah.
would be the 20th or the 21st, right? Unless you're moving it to the following week, which would make no sense because now you have to really move the calendar. I think the real question is not just whether 21st is an option. I think, is it possible to move the first day of spring? I think that's the real question, because if they can't move that first day of classes, then literally the only day available for graduation is the 20th.
Yeah, it's the 20th. So do you know, Willa, can the first day of classes be moved? That sounds like a CUNY Central thing.
So can I just, I'm sorry, point of parliamentary order. We need to limit the discussion to the motion on the floor as opposed to changes to the calendar and logistics. So the motion on the floor is, do we approve it or do we not approve this calendar?
Thank you, Leslie. Any other discussion for or against the motion? So it's a vote. Let's try a voice vote and see how it goes. Anthony's leaving and isn't going to get to say his vote.
What kind of vote do we need here?
Let's try a voice vote and Rebecca has a question. Leslie, can Rebecca ask a question?
Well, you've called for the vote. So technically, no.
Rebecca is so sorry. Wait. I'm seeing, yeah, Rebecca, maybe, well, if you have a question, Rebecca, that is not answered, then you can just vote no, and then we'll, or I'm not gonna tell you how to vote, but that would return this for more, the motion would fail and we'd be able to discuss other things, so.
We still have that motion if we wanted to return it.
Yes. We're gonna try a voice vote and see how it goes. And then if we need to count to get an accurate sense, we'll count. And again, if you are an alternate senator and your senator is present on Zoom or in the room, you are not voting. If you are a guest, you are not voting. But all senators or alternates who are taking the place of their senators, you are voting. All in favor of the motion to approve this calendar? Voice.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No,
Nay.
no,
No,
no.
You on Zoom?
You want to do some video?
Hold on, it's just a vote. All right, count?
Yes. Yeah, we need to count.
We need to
You
count.
can't tell. I don't know what that was.
So officially, just for officialness, if someone calls division, that means that they're requesting another form of vote. And ultimately, Christy, you can determine whether or not we do that. So if someone said division, which I didn't hear, but please someone say it, then then that means that you don't believe that a clear vote was captured. And Christy, if you want to then take another form of vote, you can. If you choose not to, that is your prerogative as chair.
Division.
Thank you, Stephanie.
I heard it.
You on Zoom don't know that you are considerably louder than the people in the room because the speaker is really up, so we can hear you. You might not be able to hear us, we can hear you. So, so let's do a counting vote. So if you are in favor of voting for the motion to approve the calendar as written, raise your hand. I will help count. First I'm counting in the room and then I'll count on Zoom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And now I need to stop screen sharing, and on Zoom, would you raise your hand if you are a voting member of the Senate? Did I say 12? I said 12. Raise your hand if you are voting for the calendar, if you are a voting member on Zoom. I don't see any kinds of hands.
Ryan.
Okay. Oh wait, there's one. Ryan, thank you. 13. Loretta, is that a raised hand? Okay, 14. And I think that's, wait, yeah. So 14. All opposed, raise your hand. First, I'm counting in the room. 1, 2, 3. And now I'm counting on Zoom. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh gosh, 9. 9 to 12. 13. Oh, 14, 9 to 14. 14 to 9, assuming I counted right, the motion carries. The calendar is approved, and we trust that the graduation date will reveal itself at the right time. Well, I know that's not the way it works. All right. Thank you, everyone, for voting. Patricia.
Christy, sorry, just a question. So in that case, we don't need the majority vote? We don't need the quorum vote, or that, like in terms of the majority of the Senate, or we just have the majority, or we do have the majority in terms of quorum?
This is a I have not yet faced as a senator. So tell me, parliamentarian, did we need 17 instead of 14? Yeah. Is that Leslie? Did we need 17? Did we need a full quorum vote to pass this, not just a majority of those present?
So the majority is Robert's rules. It's a simple majority. However, we have the nuances of open meetings in which we, based on past precedent, we have been using the majority as the baseline, and we've used that in elections. So legal is here so that if Maria deems that we need to continue with 17 or the quorum as the minimum threshold, then that usurps Robert's rules.
So Maria is not here, but the senator who is also legal. So
my apologies.
Yeah.
So I think that if we have, it's gonna be a majority of 17.
The majority, so 17, so we need at least 17 to pass.
No, majority of 4. So we
The
have
majority.
quorum to conduct the meeting.
Right.
And so if we have a 12-5 vote, the majority of the quorum
Okay.
Am I making sense?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
You are. So bottom line, this vote, the motion passes. All right, that's our legal counsel's opinion. Thank you very much. I don't, so there we are, and we can clarify that. Well, as Leslie said, local policy would override or practice would override Robert's rules. So
No, the law overrides Robert's rules.
the law.
Open
Thank
government law.
Open government.
I'm just
law.
gonna throw one more thing out there, that 9 nays, 14 ayes is 23, and I have more than that is listed being here, so I'm just
So we have a number of guests,
yeah, still not counting guests.
not counting, oh,
So some people abstain.
If someone chose not to vote, then again, that's
Okay,
their prerogative.
making sure for record keeping that we're okay with having those votes, especially
14 for, 9 against.
2, 3, 4, 6, 7.
Interestingly, most of those in the room were for, and most of those in Zoom land were against. I don't know what that means. Maybe, maybe, all right.
I have 27, no,
Yeah.
So,
I have Ariana music, 27, it should be 27. Oh, she didn't vote. Left, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Alex has the floor, as a
So,
guest.
What I just want to say in hindsight is, all of this was already given to each department's representative. So if there was an issue, it should have been brought to that rep, and then it could have been more like widely discussed. So I'm hoping that every department is getting all the information. With academic standing and Lila and everybody, we did so much work on this, so I'm glad it passed. But once it comes here, there's an issue, your rep should have already been bringing that out to us. It's not
Can
that
you
this is
all
new.
on Zoom hear what Alex is saying? It is a fair point, and it's one
Yeah.
thing the executive committee has discussed is that we want to value the work of the committees and make the committee and respect the work of the committee and not, I mean, give it the weight it has. That's where the work should happen on the creation of the policy, and Senate then is this final approval stage. And that is in line with what Alex is saying because of the work that's been accomplished. And Patricia, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a quick question. I mean, is there a way, and Alex, I'm completely with you on that. The question is, isn't it a bit late to get those calendars? I mean, way back when we used to have calendars, at least we would be voting for 24, 2025. Now we would be a little more ahead. So I understand that it's not the responsibility of the committee to get this going, but maybe that's why we seem to think it's rushed, because everybody is planning the fall anyway already. So the calendar, whether we approve or not, is already out there somewhere and people are using it. So all this work seems to be for naught because it's already out there. So if we really want the work of the Senate to be valid, then we have to have that process somewhat a little bit sooner, if possible.
So if you go to the website, the calendar that we are looking at is not available yet. And Lila, who's the chair, will probably, will tell you that we just received it. And as quickly as we received it, we passed it on to each of our members. And I'll tell you, like, the library must have had everyone had different things that they wanted to add. And I don't even know how Lila was able to handle all of our, but there was a lot of work. So yeah, I understand what you're saying, but it's when we got it. So I'm not sure the powers that be, when they actually decide to send it to us, but we just got it not that long ago. And we wanted to make sure that everyone here got it because when we tried to go onto the website, it's not there. It's not there in beta or draft. So no one's using that one at this time. We want, as we were saying, to get it out so people can then coordinate themselves. Like we reached out to opening sessions co-chairs. When is the date to get rid of that tentative? So we tried to do as much back work as we could, and I think we did a great job. But the thing with the calendar, I'm sure that's an issue, and I'm not really sure how to resolve it or where it actually works.
So Lila and I had been emailing with Derwent, who is interim registrar, and thoroughly overworked.
Yeah.
Because they're understaffed. He was waiting on it from CUNY. So he needs to get something from CUNY Central, and then he works on adding our LaGuardia dates. Which reminds me, this should have been in my CARES report. I wanted to mention to senators, I checked today with the provost and with VP Irfan, who then checked with Derwent. I don't know, for those of you teaching in the spring, we don't have classroom assignments yet, and it's unusually late for no classroom assignments. It is another matter of understaffedness. They're hoping to have it set by the end of the week. So for classroom assignments for the spring.
So I just make a couple of points to your comment, Patricia. So number one is we have been trying with Christy to get the calendar as early as possible compared to last year. We got it earlier, as you just mentioned. So we are working on it, and we're trying, given the context and given how much work Durban has. But the second one regarding working ahead 2 years and so on, really, I think, as you can see from the tentative dates, that it really is defined or determined by CUNY Central. If there are no dates from CUNY Central, then nothing else can be plugged in. So we depend on that kind of a template from CUNY Central, and then Durban works with that. So I don't think that, working 2 academic years ahead will ever really happen.
Yeah.
But what we are trying to do is we're trying to get things as early as possible out to the college. And I think it's about maybe a month earlier than it was last year.
Okay.
And again, the third thing, very quickly, is that in the past as well, that the things do change in the calendar, right? It's not about voting. This is not related to voting yes or no. As Anthony said, Durban will have to update certain things in the calendar as we go along. So even into the summer, he told me, and that is not because of him or his whim, but because of the graduation, because of CUNY Central and so on.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Lola. All right, and I see a comment from Loretta in the chat that students are asking about professor assignments to help with selecting sections of courses, which is a different matter, I think, than the classroom assignments, but and where that is, I don't know, but it is an issue, I know.
Students are gonna have like 3 advisors this semester, so there's an update on that.
An update on advising too. All right, I am going to move us along through the rest of the committee reports quickly. Thank you so much for your consideration of the calendar and your consideration of the children on campus policy. Yes.
I have a question for the academic standing committee.
Okay.
Can I? It's out of the calendar. I can ask later. Can I ask now?
Can you ask outside the meeting and just ask Lila?
Okay.
How about
And
that?
you too.
You can ask me. That works. I may not know, but I'll try. All right.
Shall I finish my update or not?
Yeah.
Oh. Two more things real quick. So we're looking at the next meeting, we are going back to the credit exemption policy. And based on the feedback, we'll take another crack at it and tweak it. And then I had a great discussion with faculty council and the committee on faculty about the attendance policy. I feel really good about it. I'm gonna take back the feedback, and I think we will not have to make any major changes based on how we've seen. So I'm hoping to be able to present it and get it onto the, into the voting phase in the next, at the next Senate meeting.
March 20th.
Yeah, exemption, credit exemption, and attendance policy are the 2.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Lila. And Bukri is going to ask a question outside.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Committee of Faculty, is there a report, Diane?
Nothing to report.
All right. Committee of Professional Development, I don't see either co-chairs. Budget and Finance Committee, Patricia? Do you have?
Yes, the Budget and Finance Committee is met more often than usual because of the CUNY cuts that we had to have consultation on. So we did our process of consultation. We have a plan for saving 7% now it is. So 2% was 5 extra percent. So we're saving 7%. It will go back to CUNY, and then CUNY will see whether it approves it or not. the plan that we came up with still has to go through student government. We were waiting for details from the provost about classes and all that to finalize our plan. So the committee is meeting again next week to finalize the plan that we have, so that Christy, to your document that Ned Benton sent about a survey of what kind of work these budget committees are doing on campus, we're good. I mean, we have done all the consultation that needs to happen.
So the UFS, their budget committee has sent out a survey for each campus to report on how transparent, if faculty governance has had consultations sought regarding the budget. And so we, Patricia, with my input, are going to respond to the survey. We're doing really well, which is that the administration currently believes in shared governance and is really enacting the consultation that CUNY is putting into the policies that they're recommending. So thank you, Patricia. Committee of Staff and Alumni, Cindy and Denise, anything to report?
Yeah, just quickly, we're working on the follow-up employee engagement survey. We're working to solve the problem that the number of employees has risen since we sent it last time, which means that we need either extra funds or we need to send it to a smaller group. So the next time we meet, we will work on that problem, see if we can solve that.
Great. All right, thank you, Cindy. Committee of Students, Yana. And, Susan's not here, yeah.
I don't have much to report. I mean, I haven't been able to meet with any of the students. And as I mentioned last time, I think Brian, what his position?
We don't know, yeah, I tried to.
I asked Chris, he said yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
So the president of SDA has stepped down, who was coming to Senate, okay. Get Yana, and is Ariana still there? She left. Okay, but thank you for being here. Hooray. Representing the entire student body on Senate. All right, Committee on Elections.
Yes, a quick update. Thank you for the calendar. Because now we can plan the elections. So thank you very much. Now we can have the Senate calendar and we can plan the elections. So thank you very much.
So I'm making a note. We need the oh yeah, I already have it written down. We'll prep it. We'll work on the Senate calendar for the elections. Executive committee, I already gave my report. Transfer committee, I don't see either of the co-chairs of the transfer committee. Food and Security, Justice and Community Need Committee, Rebecca, anything to report? Oh, wait, there it is.
I just put it in chat if that helps us move along.
Sure will, and it will show up in the minutes. Can you all read the chat? If your eyes are good, I'll read it. For the food and security, that committee, we want to announce there'll be another food supplies toiletries drive in conjunction with opening sessions. And they're working with the LaGuardia Humanitarian Initiative on a student faculty conference on Wednesday, May 24th. So, and there's more things happening. So be watching your email and their announcements for events coming up. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you for leading that committee too. Ad hoc committees, IT Advisory Committee, I don't see either co-chair of that committee. History Committee, Loretta, anything to report? No. Online Learning Committee, Sandra, you're here. Liz, I know is not able to be here today.
Nothing to report.
Right. And PNB Article Committee, Patricia, that's you. You're muted.
So we're moving along. We're in the final stages of Rebecca is on the committee, and the discussions are very nice, very productive. The committee is moving. We've split into two committees to tackle the work of Article 7, which is the departmental and divisional PNBs, and now we've set another subcommittee for the college-wide PNB. So hopefully we'll be done by the end of spring, but again, and Maria also is on the committee, a bunch of other people, and it's really nice. Again, it's taking time, but if we want shared governance, then we have to have the discussions.
Yes, thank you, Patricia. There is one other ad hoc committee that did not make the list. Because we created it last meeting, which is chaired by Leslie Skamaka, and I can't remember the name of it. What? The assessment and review.
Yes, it's assessment and review. The only report I have is I'm still looking for volunteers to sit on the committee. We have 2 faculty members, so if any staff or students are interested, please let me know so we can host our charter meeting.
Great, thank you, Leslie.
What is it about?
Oh, the review and assessment committee is coming out of Middle States and out of the governance plan revision to have a committee that is set up to create a process of formal review of shared governance at LaGuardia, especially the Senate, but to have a committee that steps back and looks, how are we doing? And Middle States also asked for a formal assessment process for the Senate and shared governance at LaGuardia. So that committee is going to take on that challenge. Yep, we finished they finished the governance plan revision process, and then we established this committee to kind of carry on some of that work. So contact Leslie if you are interested in being part of that work. We could use an expert in assessment, but it is assessment of, you see what we do, yeah, and how, you know, it's not your typical kind of assessment, yeah. So then Jean and the advising council.
The advising training has begun and the departmental meetings.
Okay, very good. Then Patricia, your hands up.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that in order for our committee to validate its work, we need a student. We need a student because we do have staff, but since we're looking at, it's a long story, so I'll spare everybody, but we do need a student because we do have staff on the committee. We absolutely need a student to vote so that when we go to the Board of Trustees, the committee was set up carefully in accordance to that CUNY manual of policy.
So we need a student member, which we only have one student member. Charis, I don't know. Yeah, are you still there? No, maybe not.
Can we recruit outside of the Senate? I mean, could it be a student that is not even somebody from SGA or President Society or somebody? Otherwise, we may run into the fact that we can't validate the work of that committee.
Yeah. So sounds good, and we'll get Charis on it and work with John. We are ready for the Senate Parliamentarians Robert Rules Refresher Series. Leslie, do you want to see if you can share the screen?
Sure.
And I do have it if you are not able to.
Is it showing for everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see if I can. Okay, in the interest of time, I certainly won't go on and on as I can possibly do, but I'd like to encourage you to think about questions, question what we do in meetings, and make sure that your constituencies know how this process works. I do, before getting into the new business, just want to remind everyone that even it says rules, and rules are of course important for order, but really Robert's Rules is there for equity and to make sure that all voices can be heard. And so sometimes it's hard to hear that if you're the one that has a lot to say and have no problem raising your hand and sharing your thoughts. But for those who are a little more quiet, this really tries to level the playing field. The refresher for today, and certainly this presentation will be available with the minutes in the agenda, but is just to focus on sort of the latter half of our agenda, because it is really important information that happens at that part of the agenda. And sometimes because we get so engrossed in wonderful content that we don't quite get to the end of the agenda. So just talking a little bit more about the end of the meetings and how important it is to reserve time and allow and encourage members of our organization to contribute to these parts. So the parts of the agenda I'm referring to are specifically unfinished business and new business. If you've served on any kind of committee or any kind of board, you may have seen on agendas in the past the term old business. And I have just joked that I really don't appreciate the term old as I get older, but this isn't really about me. The term old business is actually something else in Robert's rules, and it's talking about business that has already been decided or voted upon and sort of bringing that back up. And that's generally not what we do on an agenda. We look at unfinished business. So if there's something that we were discussing and couldn't come to a vote on, or if we've requested the vote to be moved to another meeting, that's what unfinished business is, something that really wasn't completed. Old business, we can indeed revisit, but there are some rules in place for that as far as how to bring up business that's already come to a vote. So that rarely happens, but it certainly could, particularly if there are enough interest in the body or even in the constituency. Or all of our constituencies to revisit something. So that is an important thing to note, and I certainly can talk a little bit more about those kinds of motions in another session. So as far as unfinished, really we're talking about unfinished business, what we've already set up in particular meetings. In the past, the chair does not call for unfinished business. She should already know. However, it is discussed in the executive committee, just between all of the members of the executive committee, checking their notepads to say, oh yeah, did we resolve this? Did we do this? If you ever feel that something is missing, or did we get a resolution to something? I mean, don't hesitate to ask questions, but generally that you'll notice that there's no call to say, is there any unfinished business? Because it's already determined, and hopefully all of our I's are dotted and T's are crossed. As far as what you might see as unfinished, the motion or the business at hand is the question. So that terminology, the question, the motion, those are synonymous. And so there are some issues or some times that you can see unfinished business. The first is when something was being discussed and that meeting was adjourned. There's a couple of reasons potential adjournment. Sometimes emergency happens. Sometimes we go over time. The meeting, there's a motion for adjournment, so there's not enough time, and that gets postponed to the next session. Again, if it was listed as part of unfinished business, but again, got pushed again, so it still wasn't reached. And then a question has been postponed, meaning that we officially moved to discuss it at a later date. So those are all examples of unfinished business. If a question was postponed, there's a number of ways that we can do that, and that is by postponing it to a certain date, or indefinitely, which means we don't ever want to talk about that again, or just another predetermined time. So we have a lot of flexibility in when we can discuss unfinished business, but we need to be very clear in motions the deadline that we have. So if we say that we're postponing a particular item to the next meeting, it absolutely does need to be on the next meeting's agenda. If we have postponed it for an undetermined length of time, a lot of times that's a way to sort of brush a motion under the carpet. So we want to be careful that we continue to keep track of our business. any matter can be postponed. So that this process is typically known as tabling. So when you take something from the table, you are moving it to another time. That does need to be motioned, seconded, and approved. So we can't just willy-nilly start to move things around. And that's why we approve the agenda as well. So the entire body is very comfortable with what we're to be discussing and staying on track. Oops. So here is just a quick example. And when you have the slides at your disposal, you can certainly take a look at the flow of business here. But this is just a sample of what I'm talking about. And again, we're not going to be sneaky, but just so you know, if you are trying to push your own agenda, we see you, but just to be very aware, I mean, we don't see that a lot here in our meetings, but if you attend meetings, outside of LaGuardia, you might see some people trying to play a little fast and loose with the rules. And so just as a warning to you to keep your eye open, but that's also part of your prerogative. If you really think that there is a member who is abusing either their floor time or their use of motions, you can always have a parliamentary inquiry, and the chair would then take a look at that to make sure that we are being as honest and transparent as possible. As far as new business, and here's, I think, where we as a Senate can really bring in community issues, and just like with the children on campus, just serve as a really educational part of our meeting to the rest of our constituencies, so they know that if there is a question out there, that it can come to the Senate, and we can either, if it's not part of what we act upon, we can make sure that that issue or that question gets to where it needs to go. So this is a really important part of the agenda. And you will hear Christy ask, is there any new business? And so this would be to the voting members who are present to bring up an order of business. These do need to come in forms of motions. And so again, as you heard today, when we voted on the academic calendar, Anthony moved to vote, and then it was seconded and we discussed. So if you have some new business to bring to the table, it's in the form of a motion. The person who moves does have right of first refusal, learning how to talk here. And so you can support, you can clarify, or whatever you need to do to explain why you're bringing this motion to the Senate. What is potentially a smoother process is that if you do have a question or something that you would like to raise with the Senate, bringing that to the executive committee prior can help us not only plan out the agenda to make sure there's adequate time to discuss, but also to potentially place issues where they need to. So if you make some type of motion that maybe isn't under the Senate's purview, we can avoid that kind of difficulty and make sure that your question is absolutely where it needs to be. So this is, or really can be, a larger part of our meeting. So if you're talking with any member of your constituency, or even talking amongst yourselves, and there is something that you would like to see the Senate consider, please use this time for new business to do that. Things right here I have, it can introduce any new item for consideration unless there are notice requirements. So what that means is, for example, with curriculum, we have a consent calendar in place and there are time requirements. Generally, if you are bringing up a motion to consider, there aren't any kind of time requirements. But again, that's why if you have enough lead time to let the executive committee know that you would like this discussed, we can make sure that all of the processes are done correctly, and that there are no timeframes or other committees that would need to review that question prior to the Senate body. So how is new business done? The chair will ask, is there any new business? And any voting member can then introduce new business, and you're making a motion. So I move that whatever you're looking to inquire about. the motion does need a second, and then there's discussion on the floor. Potentially there's a vote, or it could be tabled and become unfinished business. So we do need to have some kind of resolution or action at some point in our calendar. Once that is sufficiently discussed or voted or actioned on, then the chair will continue to ask if there's any other new business. If not, then that part of the agenda will be finished. You have the power. And I know that without as much, if you're not a Robert's Rules nerd like I am, you might not really understand how much power you do have as a voting member of the Senate. It's up to you. If you bring new business to the table, we talk about it. And I think that's incredibly important and powerful for you all to realize that we are all equal members of this organization, this body. And so it's really important that you use your voice. And if someone in your constituency is bringing something to you, like in Sandra's department, how they brought concerns about the academic calendar, and that's really what shared governance is all about. Yes, some things might seem trivial to you, but it's not trivial to the person who's bringing it. So we want to show respect to everyone's questions. And maybe a constituency doesn't understand the impacts on another, but we do want to be respectful. And hey, it's a good day when we all learn something. So the thing that I have bolded is where we get a little bit, we need a little more practice, I think, and it's so easy to start discussing before we actually have a motion on the floor because we want to understand what we're talking about. But it is okay to have the motion on the floor. The motion is generally in the positive. So if you, again, going back to Anthony's motion, we move to approve as opposed to we move to not approve. Now we do this in the positive. And having that conversation allowed us to really then flesh out, was it an appropriate time to talk about the academic calendar? Now, what fell out of that was some questions. So Patricia asked a question about the process of getting that content, and the academic standing committee responded. So potentially that could be new business. It could be, can the Senate have access to academic calendars 2 years in advance? So that could be something that comes to the table if it is a concern to the body. Again, it comes up as a motion, so as long as there's new business to be brought up and discussed, then it's important for that to be open. If you're not a voting member of the Senate, but yet you have something of interest, you can certainly contact your senator. If there is time in a Senate meeting, guests can certainly be called upon to ask questions, but only voting members are allowed to actually move. So that if you do have something that you want heard, discussed, brought up, definitely make sure that your senator is aware so that we can get that to the Senate floor. With adjourning, so once everything is voted on, either it's settled or it's postponed or tabled, the chair will continue to say, is there any further business? And then if there is no other addition, the chair can then say, if there's no objection, the meeting will now adjourn. So that means we don't necessarily have to move to adjourn the meeting. The reason why we tend not to do this is because we allow for announcements. And so if there are any announcements that you just want to, like the faculty council does a lot of sorry, brain's done, auctions, and the Food and Insecurity Committee is looking for donations. So those are announcements as well. So we tend not to cut the meeting short there, but you can certainly see the chair saying, hey, if there's nothing else, we're adjourning. So that is certainly in Robert's Rules. I just wanted to deviate for just a really quick moment to talk about committee reports, and we can absolutely talk more about this in another session, but Christy has mentioned that the comment of no report is not a negative. So please don't think that a committee is not doing work and therefore not reporting. If there really isn't anything that the body needs to be concerned about or the body needs to look forward to, then there's no report. So that is a completely accurate way to to present. And if you do have something that is really important and concerning, that does allow us to balance the agenda time to provide space for everyone to be heard when it's time. The committee reports are in basically two sort of process buckets, if you will. What you heard today was a combination of both. Some committees reported, here's what we're doing. And the second is asking us to decide on something. And so you do want to pay attention to that as far as the committee doing its work and then the committee completing its work and bringing that to the Senate for further consideration. One thing I did want to also bring up about committee reports and really governance and Robert's rules in general is, since we've passed the new governance plan and we are sort of moving into updated processes and more transparency, I just want to share with you a little bit about how decision-making is described in Robert's rules. And I think what we're looking for as far as, taking this body to the next level, first of all, you're all brilliant. You deal with me, it's fantastic. We have learned, we have changed so much, and we have organized so much since I started back on the Senate in 2014. So that is just makes me so super happy. But I'd like to see us continue to get better and more streamlined. And so we really do want to discuss, as Christy alluded to, trusting our committees to do the work and bringing that for our approval. As you saw with the children on campus policy, with the attendance policy, the work is being done in our subcommittees, and yet some groups feel like, hey, I didn't hear about that. And we do want to listen and make sure that we are getting feedback. We also want to make sure that feedback gets to the right people. And so if there is feedback, let's make sure we get it to the committees, and then the committees can incorporate that feedback. So when we bring something to the Senate, we are not writing the policy. We are moving to approve or not approve. And I don't want you to think that we are a rubber stamper, because that's not the case. Our committees are made up of senators, our committees are made up of our constituencies, and they're doing really good work. And so we do want to move to the point where we really feel confident in our committees and we trust them. And when they do bring something to the Senate, it has gone through all of those proper reviews. And that'll save us time on the Senate floor from saying, oh, I never heard about this. So we do want to really make sure that we're holding everyone accountable. And that is just my little pitch for the assessment committee as well. So if you feel that your representative isn't representing, or you're not hearing about these things in your department meeting, you don't keep that stuff a secret. Do let us know so that we can continue to improve transparency and communication. Here's just a little bit more as far as committee reports. And I'm hoping that as we move closer to enacting the new governance plan, we'll be able to do a little bit of training as far as committee chairs and leadership, so that you can feel more confident in your role and your communication. But again, here's just a little bit of information on how to present a report and how to respond to questions from the Senate. If there is a motion that's needed, if you're asking for an action on the Senate floor, do make sure that it is a motion. So a motion to approve. With committee reports, if the committee has voted on something and it comes to the Senate, it doesn't need a second. So if the committee is proposing something, they can propose it, provided the speaker is a voting member. They propose it, and then we can discuss the motion at hand. That is the fastest we can go at the moment. So hopefully that was a little bit insightful as to the latter half of the agenda. I'm happy to take any questions. I'm happy to talk with anyone at any point about all this good stuff. These are available for you, and I'm still getting over my fear of being on YouTube, and I'm considering doing a video series on Robert's Rules. So if that would be of help to anyone, I'm happy to do that as well. Just blocking comments. So that's what I've got for you. Again, if there's any questions or anything I can go over for you now, I'm happy to do that.
Great. Thank you so much, Leslie. Are there Are there questions? But also it is now 4:30, whatever, 4, which is about time for us to end. There is a thank you. Reminder to all senators, one of our key roles, as we talked especially about last year, is communication between Senate and your constituents. So new business is a way to bring what you're hearing from your constituents to Senate. You can bring it in advance to the executive committee. That's helpful, but not necessary. You can raise it at the Senate meeting itself in new business. And now, I know there's no unfinished business. Is there any new business? Then any announcements that you really need to announce? And then I believe, unless there are objections, we can adjourn.
Loretta has her hand up.
Loretta, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you can count on me. Sorry, people. I'm looking for volunteers to help make calls to new students. I know the faculty was asked to help with continuing. I will only give you 20 people, and it's the script is at your discretion. I just give you some guidelines and some pointers. All you have to do is email me, and I appreciate anyone who can help. We're all in this together. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Loretta. So contact Loretta if you're willing to volunteer to call some students. Any other announcements? Then, is there any objection if we adjourn? Erica, I don't have a gavel, but if I did, I would say we are adjourned. Thank you so much.
I have it. So the gavel will be yours in March.
I don't need to move to adjourn. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all on Zoom. Bye. Oh, I'm waving at my camera. All right.
I figured out is who everybody is. I don't know.